And this Fox News alert now. The State Department is saying that American citizens are among the injured in these Paris attacks, and ISIS is claiming responsibility for the carnage there. So why didn't anyone see it coming? Joining us now, a man who used to consider himself an Islamic extremist, Maajid Nawaz, author of the book Radical. He is also founding chairman of a counter-extremism group now called Quilliam Foundation. Maajid, thanks very much for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Everybody is shaking their heads and saying, why? What could motivate people of whatever religious belief to unload Kalashnikov fire in a crowded theater, to blow up people outside a stadium? What's the motivation?
Well, you see, the modus of attack and the way in which they've been described as shooting at people as if they were hunting for birds demonstrates to us something very clearly. It's about time we recognized that these people have adopted what I call the Islamist ideology. They are ideologically dogmatic and driven to bring about a theocracy in the world. And, you know, those people on the streets of Paris weren't responsible for any foreign policy decision these people may or may not have been aggrieved by. And I think, unfortunately, it's been far too long we haven't been able to name this ideology for what it is, isolate it from the vast majority of Muslims who don't subscribe to this form of terror, and actually start dealing with the appeal of this ideology. We can't even begin if the president here isn't even able to name
So what is the appeal? So and what's so shocking is these are not people from Waziristan. These are people who grew up, I think we're assuming, in France with all the benefits of liberal democracy and prosperity, and yet they're specifically rejecting every element of that. Why?
And up until now, the vast majority of them are born and raised in Europe. So there are legitimate concerns with refugees, and of course there must be security measures put in place. But let's not get distracted from the fact that these are born and raised European citizens.
So true.
You know, Mohammed Amwazi, Jihadi John, this guy he came to the UK at 6 and went through our entire education system, went to university. He was living on welfare. The country was giving him everything that he could have hoped for, more so than Kuwait gave him, and yet he turned against the country. So the appeal here is, unfortunately, it's not a sense that they're not getting their rights in Western countries. There is a fully blown global jihadist insurgency. It's the new zeitgeist for angry young Muslims who want to vent their frustration, and they're joining this new bandwagon. Unfortunately, this jihadist insurgency has taken root among angry European Muslims. We have to understand, without stigmatizing the vast majority of Muslims, that that's where the problem is coming from. Put it in proportionate terms, and then begin to put down a long-term strategy to make this ideology unappealing.
But what is the best tool to be used against radical extremism, radical, jihad that we're seeing? Because it just seems to be quite popular and very easy, the lure to be able to get people that have had all the benefits of society and a great education and upbringing. Nevertheless, they gravitate towards it.
Well, let's begin by not artificially declaring mission accomplished moments. You know, at the end of the day, we heard just yesterday from the president that ISIS has been contained.
Shrinking,
Before that, when bin Laden was killed, people were assuming that's the end of jihadism and the end of Al-Qaeda. This problem is metastasizing. We have to understand the problem for what it is, get to grips with it, and recognize this isn't going to go away until, in the long term, we put down a communities-based strategy whereby people who are bravely challenging this extremist ideology are not called Islamophobes, they're not called racists, but they're recognized for what they are, and that is real heroic voices within Muslim
So I can't resist. What turned you? You describe yourself as a former Islamic extremist. You're not now. Why? What was the moment that switched your mind?
There wasn't a moment, but I spent 5 years as a political prisoner in Egypt, and during that time I was living with some of the leading voices of the jihadist movements. This is before ISIS, this is before, many years. This is up until from 2002 to 6. Living up close with these people, a thought dawned upon me in 2007, and that was, my God, if these guys ever come to power and declare their caliphate, this is going to be hell on earth. And I don't want to live under that type of society, because I saw them up close. A bit like the jihadist version of Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Sure.
And so I called it back in 2006. I said, that caliphate's going to be a nightmare. And of course, now we see it for what it is.
Well, hell on earth happened in Paris just yesterday.
Maajid Nawaz. Maajid, thank you for your insights.
Pleasure, thank you.